14th of August 2023. In this news flash I'm going to talk about a speech that Malema made, and it seems to me it was to an audience prior to the party that they had in the FNB stadium. Now early this morning Mr. X sent me this. Good morning. Can you please find some good 20 minutes to listen to this and respond with comments on 1. What you agree with him on, and what do you disagree with him and your alternative to that. Now I initially thought that I'll answer him on WhatsApp, but then I realized that it's going to be a long discussion and decided to rather do a skidmark about it. Now, if we listen to what Malema was saying there, he talks about the role of NATO, and I've done skidmarks on that. I agree with him on that. NATO is an organization that should have been disbanded long ago. NATO is out and out an aggressive Western institution to promote the American hegemony. That's all it is. It is a organization that is forever threatening Russia. And now they're threatening China as well. They are threatening Africa. So as far as I'm concerned, NATO is a terrorist organization. That's what they are. Where they were originally set up to be a defensive bloc, they have become an extremely aggressive bloc. Then he talks about the AGOA agreement, and I agree with him on that, and I have done a skidmark on it. I've done skidmarks on the AGOA, so I don't disagree with him on that. He talks about the way the European Union wants to interact with South Africa, and I agree with him on that as well, because the reality is that the Europeans are looking for their own benefit and own advantages, and that's all. It's not a two-way street when you deal with the European Union from an African perspective. And like it or don't like it, the fact of the matter is that during the apartheid era, we had to deal with sanctions like hell, which were pushed by the European Union and America. And we had to overcome that. What astounds me is that the South African industrial base was set up and designed exactly to stop the bullying from the West. We were mining our own minerals and we were refining our own minerals. But people like Malema is part and parcel of the tools that destroyed the industrial base in South Africa. And they destroyed the industrial base in South Africa primarily with their BEE and affirmative action. That is what they did. And all they were interested in getting the white people out. Get the whites out of the industries. So the whites left and the industries died. And the ones that are still operating is now in the hands of foreign companies, no longer in the hands of South Africa. So that point of his, that South Africa must take ownership of its own mineral wealth, that point is, as far as I'm concerned, politician blah 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 blah, because his actions, he is part of the actions that destroyed the economy. And then he made a statement that, and he referred to the fact that they're in the audiences, blacks and coloreds and whites and Indians and all of that. And he makes a big song and dance about that. But just the following day, he sings, "Kill the boer, kill the farmer." So how can you respect him for what he says at the meeting and forget about what he says in the stadium? He is a liar, a political liar. Now, I have always made it very clear, I don't trust any politicians. None of them. They're all tarnished, they're all dirty. And when you hear a speech like the one that is in the video, and I'm going to put a link for you in it, in the description of this video on YouTube. When you listen to that speech, there is a few things that you have to think about. And the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, who wrote that speech? Who was the speechwriter? Now for me, that listened to lots of these politicians talking, and listening a lot to Triple X, that speech was written by a Triple X agent. That speech wasn't written by Malema, because the points that are being pushed by Malema, a lot of them are in line with the Triple X agenda. And then he makes the statement that there must be a state mine. Now, unfortunately, this state of South Africa has proven that over 30 years, they were totally capable of applying their superior logic to the industries and the mining sector and fuck it up. Why? Because of incompetence, lack of experience, lack of skills. But that's it. Then he makes a big song and dance about corruption. And he talks about how China and how Singapore handled corruption. And I have to listen and shake my head and just take into consideration that the South African government machinery, of which he's part, has got a very poor record when it comes to handling corruption. They protect the people that commits the corruption, and then they make big stories on their stages about it. And meantime, many of them are participants in that corruption. So what he says about corruption and what is actually done about corruption is totally in conflict. And then we get to the situation of a state bank. And he makes a big song and dance about how state banks must compete with private banks and all of that. But he does not make a single mention to how VBS turned out for black people. And there is a hell of a lot of stories about the involvement of the EFF top structure in the VBS scandal. And then we've got the same thing. He talks about corruption, but he doesn't mention his role in the tender corruption in his province, Limpopo. He makes no mention of that. So he made the right noises for the audience that was sitting there. That is what he did. And he also played for his support side. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at everything that he has been saying there critically, he makes very positive points with which I agree, and I've done Skidmarks on it. He's concerned about that American base in Botswana. I think it's a little bit late, but I just want to rectify it. It's not a case of 2 minutes from the base to the Union buildings. It's a little bit longer than that. But from that base to Cape Town is 17 minutes. So from that base to Pretoria should be about 8 minutes, 9 minutes. The fact of the matter is, he mentions that. But he doesn't mention the British base in Lesotho. Doesn't mention that. And he does not refer to the EFF stance of genocide towards whites. He doesn't talk about that. So, although he made a lot of good points in his speech, points that I agree with, and I have done Skidmarks on it, and I have explained my reasons for being in agreement with that in those Skidmarks, the underlying message is the state must take control of everything. He talks about education and what Kenya did to education. Where does this man live? Is he living in a bubble? The fact of the matter is, his own supporters are part of the destructive force that is destroying schools and burning schools, burning libraries, burning the buses that must transport the children to the schools. He is in that. And then he wants to stand there and say, yeah, Kenya has built a state school system that is now forcing some private schools to close. May I remind him, in South Africa, the South African health services, the state hospitals were the best in the country. The cabinet and ministers and presidents went to state hospitals. They didn't go to private hospitals. They went to state hospitals. And here in South Africa, what has happened? The state hospitals has been fucked beyond repair, basically. And all those politicians, including Malema, they go to private clinics, they go to private doctors. They don't go to state doctors. But they are part and parcel of the machinery that fucked up the health system. So, although he made the right noises, like each and every politician, he's a fucking liar. What he says and what he does is two different things. And the fact of the matter is, if you are an uninformed person, a person that only follows the mainstream media, that speech may look to you as a fantastic speech. But if you look at it critically, you will see this political bullshit. That's all it is, political bullshit. You must always ask yourself when a politician speaks. 1, who's the audience? 2, who wrote the speech? That is what you have to answer. Get those answers and you will understand. So, in conclusion, he made a good speech for the audience. But that speech is not based in the reality of his own actions. His own actions, his own words contradicts a hell of a lot of the things that he has said there. So, there is my summary of this speech. And as I said, I'll put the link in here. You can go and look at the speech yourself and listen to it. That was a well-polished political speech, not based in reality. And he does not mention his role in the destruction of South Africa. Please give me a like and a subscribe. And I want to say thank you to the people that are supporting the channel financially. It really makes a difference to me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.